You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Welcome to Convenience Matters. My name is Jeff Lenard with NACS, and today I'm joined by two guests to dissect what consumers are saying about gas prices. John Eichberger, Executive Director of the Fuels Institute, and Paige Anderson, Director of Government Relations for NACS. So welcome to both of you.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Jeff.
So the April issue of NACS magazine is dedicated, the cover story is looking at what consumers say about fuels. It was written when gas prices were $3.50 a gallon. They are not $3.50 a gallon now. They're over $4 a gallon. So let's start right there in terms of looking at elevated prices. The AAA came out with a survey that says the tipping point has now happened in terms of will people drive less? Will people behave less? NACS did a magazine article in 2007. We found that 371 was the tipping point. In 2008, we found that 371 was a tipping point. So I'll start with you, John. Is there a tipping point that people will change their behavior, and have we reached it?
I don't think there is. I don't think there's a tipping point. I think what we've seen in surveys over the years and behavior over the years is people adapt. They get used to prices. They don't like it. They're going to complain. It has a significant impact on their feelings about the economy. But typically, whenever you ask them, at what point will you change your behavior, buy a different car, it's always more. It's always the next threshold. So that point at which people think they're going to change behavior keeps moving with the price of fuel. I've looked at the data over the years, and there's not a whole lot of variability in terms of fuel consumption when prices go up. I mean, so much of our driving is non-discretionary. And, if they're going to think about buying a different vehicle, that's one thing, but very few people are going to go out there and buy a new vehicle because prices went up. They may change the vehicle they purchase on the next time they buy a new vehicle, or try to get a more fuel efficient vehicle. But I don't really think there's a tipping point that's going to have dramatic changes. And, Jeff, you and I have looked at this for years. Whenever prices get to a certain level, they are so quickly and so often followed by a massive drop. And so any momentum to change behavior is offset by some massive change in market conditions that follow these run-ups. So I'm pretty skeptical that there's going to be a major change in consumer behavior in the future.
Paige.
I think, one thing I would add to what John just shared, and completely agree with him, is that driving behavior did change during the pandemic. And as we're getting back to whatever the new normal is, you still have a percentage of folks who are still working from home. And you still have folks that perhaps what's changing is maybe the time that they're doing their errands, whereas before they would drive to work and then on the way home stop at the grocery store, those types of activities and errands. What you're seeing is, okay, you're working from home, but maybe you're going to the grocery store at 10 o'clock in the morning to take a break between your Zoom meetings. So, the reality is people are still driving. They're not changing their behavior in terms of, nope, I'm going to walk to work. I'm going to use public transportation. Part of it is a lot of public transportation in areas isn't fully up and operational back to rush hour times like they were pre-pandemic. So I think we have to factor that in. So if you're saying that, is driver behavior changing, compared to 2019? Maybe a little bit, but that was due to the pandemic.
That's exactly what consumers told us. There's still about the same percentage of people that are filling up in the morning. It's pushed back, I think, a little later, and it's exactly what you're saying. It's that 10 o'clock grocery shop, not that 8 o'clock drive into the office in some cases. And John, I want to go back to what you had mentioned earlier about we've done consumer surveys. You used to do monthly consumer surveys where we asked, what would you do? What would gas prices have to be to somewhat change your behavior and to significantly change your behavior? And I think at the time I used the line, it's like that scene in the movie Poltergeist, where somebody's running down the hall and the hall keeps extending. and that's exactly what we saw with consumers talking about gas prices. They said that it didn't matter what the price was. It was always $1 higher that they'd say they'd somewhat change behavior, and it was $2 higher that they'd say they'd significantly change your behavior. And so basically what you're saying is that probably holds true, if for no other reason that they have to drive, they have to do errands, they have to take the kid to soccer practice, they have to do all these other things. And because of that, the average American is driving 33 miles a day, just like they did before the pandemic.
And, it's not, you and I have always said people are going to tell you different things when you ask them questions. The data supports what they've said. And I've looked at the data over 20, 30 years. I've looked at the data from individual stores. The consumption of fuel doesn't change when prices go up. Materially, if there's a sharp spike in prices, you're going to see a reaction in the market. But over time, it doesn't really change. And to Paige's comment, they're not just telling us they're shopping and buying at different times. They are driving at different times. NREX has data on tracking people's travel, and I've looked at it. It is not huge, but there is a shift to later in the morning when most miles are being driven. And so people's behavior has changed, and that is because of the pandemic, because of lifestyle changes. But it is always interesting when people tell you something, test it with the data. And what I've seen is what they're telling us is pretty true. I mean, they're not going to dramatically change their behavior because of prices.
And Jeff, one thing to put in perspective that I think is a little bit different than, prior instances of dramatic increases in gas prices is we're in a very high inflationary period. We've got huge supply chain disruptions and challenges. And so you've seen hourly rates go up dramatically, particularly in essential businesses. You've seen the cost of milk, bread, all products across the line have gone up. And so, consumers have always tried to balance, their checkbooks and how much they have to spend a month and what's most important. And the reality is, gasoline and fuel is something that's, the number one thing after housing of what folks have to buy. And so you're going to find folks cutting their budgets elsewhere, not necessarily in fuel, because as John said, they've got to get to work and do the errands and get their kids to soccer practice.
And I think the other big thing, the surveys we did, Jeff, showed that gas price sign is a huge bellwether of consumer sentiment. And 70 to 85%, no matter what the price was during that 5-year survey period we did, they always said the gas prices had a significant effect on their feelings about the economy. Add to what Paige has said, with inflation and everything else going on, the consumer sentiment on the economy has got to be tanking. And that's going to have repercussions across the economy, not just in terms of transportation energy.
Yeah, you don't have to look at the stock ticker to have a positive or negative feeling about the economy when you just drive by and you just see those gas price signs. The average consumer, that's probably the most obvious financial indicator of the economy, and or misperceived as an indicator of the economy. When we talk about the tipping point and what people might do to change behavior, of course, one thing that comes up is EVs. And interestingly, in our consumer survey, we asked people what percentage of all new cars sold are EVs and what percentage of all vehicles on the road are EVs. What they said was 15% of all vehicles on the road. That's the median number. 15% of all cars on the road are EVs. And we know that percentage is less than 1%. So they kind of miss that. But I think what it really does is it shows that the EV commercials, the drumbeat about EVs really has taken hold with consumers. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is, can they do anything about it? Can they buy new EVs? And I'll start with you on that one, John.
So, if you tell people something enough, and if everybody's telling them something, they start to believe it, whether the facts are there or not. Headlines are touting the electric vehicle revolution. And I use the term in my presentations all the time. There is no revolution. Revolution's sudden, dramatic, complete change. There's an accelerating evolution. The fact of the matter is electric vehicles hit 4% of sales last year, at the end of the year. And they're on an upward trajectory. However, what we're hearing in the news, all the pledges from the OEMs, all the forecast projections, those are really predicated on a perfect market, on a supply system that's not disrupted, on a production stream that's not disrupted. When was the last time anybody made a multi-year plan that didn't have disruption? People can say, well, John, the supply chain and the microchip shortage last year, those were anomalies. Sure, supply chain is still problematic. And with the microchip shortage, it's going to get worse. Ukraine produces 70% of the world's neon. Neon's a critical ingredient to producing microchips. And so the unforeseen, unexpected disruptions that have a major impact on production streams are never taken into consideration when you're making these 2030, 2035 pledges or these forecasts. And it's going to have a disruptive effect. So EVs are going to continue to gain market share, but it's not going to be nearly as rapid as some of the advocates think it's going to be because of natural progression of market. There's 270 million light-duty vehicles in the U.S. It takes a lot of time, even if you're able to buy the vehicles, which right now, supply constraints makes it very difficult to find an electric vehicle if you want to buy one.
I would say, Jeff, with consumers, obviously, there is more of a positive impression that consumers now have of EVs than they did, say, even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. There's the cool factor, the technology factor. There's the fact that there's so many different choices out there. So if you like driving a smaller SUV and you don't want that tiny car, there's usually, the OEMs have an EV design of that. And so you're seeing more options, more education. But as John said, the reality is, even if you went to a car dealership right now and had the money and wanted to buy yourself an EV, they're not available. I mean, there's like 12, 24-month waiting list to purchase it. Not to mention they're slapping, and it's not just EVs, it's also smaller economy, or high efficiency vehicles. Also is that there's a premium extra rate because of that supply and demand issue to purchase that vehicle. So cost is still a factor. And, range anxiety improvements are also getting better. It used to always be, well, what's the challenges to getting EVs in the marketplace? And it was usually cost and range anxiety and consumer choice of type of vehicle were the three key issues. And you're seeing all of these addressed, but as John said, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be an evolution to get there, not a revolution.
And I think, Paige, you made a great point, and Jeff, the survey is saying consumers are interested. They're very interested, and the industry has done a great job of educating them and bringing electric vehicles into reality for them as an option. But one of the proof points, last year, 2021, we were supposed to have, I think, dozens of new electric vehicles brought to market. We had 18 or 19 models registered a sale in the electric vehicle space in 2021. We had an increase in units sold. The number of models did not diversify like we anticipated. But to Paige's point, we're going to have vehicles in the body style customers want to buy. They're going to have the range that they're comfortable with. They're going to be cost efficient and cost competitive. Now you get into infrastructure. And one of the big factors with infrastructure is, sure, we can build chargers to satisfy EV driver needs, and the EVs will have a list in the vehicle where all the chargers are. But if you're a family on the fence about, do I buy an EV or not, and you don't know where charging infrastructure is already located because it's not in your face like gas stations are you going to feel comfortable that you can get a charge anywhere, whenever you need it, just like you can gasoline? So the infrastructure has to be built up to such a level that the on-the-fence consumer doesn't question the availability of charging infrastructure. And we're a long way from that.
And one of the questions we asked in the survey relates exactly to what you were just talking about, John, has to do with chargers. And we asked consumers. The Biden administration has talked about 500,000 EV chargers to be installed to move us forward with EVs. And we asked, where should they be located? And we gave consumers choices. The traditional ones that the charging companies have long touted were restaurants, malls, places like that. And those were very low on the list. The two top things on the list make sense. It fits into where people already fill up. It was interstate rest areas and gas stations. So, Paige, from your perspective, I assume that's mostly a good thing, except for the interstate rest areas, which might not necessarily provide the competition that we're seeking.
Well, if you want to really deal with range anxiety, it's not just about distance and having, X number of chargers within a certain period of miles. It's looking at where do consumers drive each and every day and where do they stop to fuel their vehicles, and sort of mirroring that transparent, highly fungible, liquid fuels market and marrying that up with the EV charging. So if you're driving the same, place to the grocery store, you go to the same diner for breakfast, you go to work each and every day, you go to the same schools to drop your kids off, you have a place where you fuel your vehicles, and you need to mirror that with EV chargers and putting them along the way. I mean, it makes sense when you have 116,000 gas stations. Why wouldn't you put an EV charger there? But the question for, if you can see the gas price sign and you see E15, E0, E10, diesel fuel, and oh, by the way, an electric charger symbol there, and that customer knows that where they drive each and every day, they can stop and charge their vehicle, that's going to add to a comfort level. The reality is right now is, most folks charge at home or at work. But the reality is that's not going to be the only place they're going to charge in the future. And so the more that you can mirror the things they like in the current market with EV charging, that's going to be a good thing.
So I want to, we talked about the tipping point for price and talked about EVs and what choices people have. I want to end by just talking a little bit about the future, this summer drive. And AAA in its survey said that so far consumers are saying, yes, we're going to do a summer drive. What we found in our survey is consumers said, yes, we're going to go on a summer drive. And if you are going to hit the road, it's still more cost effective than other means. And all the other means of transportation, of course, will also face higher oil prices. Jet fuel will cost more. However you plan on traveling will cost more because of the higher price of oil. This is not a gasoline price issue. But the one thing I liked in seeing our survey results is we ask, why? Why are you taking a summer drive? And we offered choices like, because of the fun memories, because it's cheaper, because it's more convenient. And people said the fun. They said it's the experience, it's creating memories. So that's really good news for our industry, that people want to hit the road. So let me see if we can just end by, since it's fun, since it's about experience, what might a retailer do to tell that story to consumers, if you have thoughts about that? And start with you on that one, Paige.
There's no doubt that there is a sentimental feeling that everybody, a little bit of nostalgia that everybody's feeling coming out of the pandemic. You can't help but watch, National Lampoon's Vacation and the big road trip to Wally World and stop and see the, biggest, circle of twine and all those fun things. And each of us has those type of memories. And I think retailers who are along the highways where people are going to hit the road, Route 66, whatever it may be, in your national parks, clearly having, marketing to that consumer of, hey, put the kids in the family truckster and head to Wally World is going to be a good thing. I know my husband and I, we're packing up the dogs and we're going to be doing a road trip, putting our bikes and our fishing poles on the SUV and hit the road. And I hope others do as well.
And John.
Yeah, what can retailers do? You've got to continue to providing the options and providing the refreshments. I look back on my road trips growing up, and we didn't have all the distractions kids have today. So we were whining and we were complaining in the backseat, stop touching me, that kind of stuff. Today, they got their headphones on, they got their iPads out. It must be a much quieter trip for the parents than it used to be. And the destination becomes the objective rather than the trip. You think back to the Muppet song, getting there is half the fun. I don't know that's the case anymore for the kids at least. But when you make a stop to get gas, go to the bathroom, how are those stores offering the most exciting distractions possible? What kind of food service, what kind of snacks, what kind of other type of road trip games might you be able to offer? Can we help break that technology? Now, keep in mind, my parents always went through the desert, so there'd be no Wi-Fi anyway, so I'd be in trouble today regardless. But what can you do to kind of bring those families together and give them some sort of experience they can enjoy together in the car rather than being off in their own world? That's something that maybe is something they want to think about.
I know that some of our favorite places have great food, clean bathrooms, obviously lots of fueling options, and yes, a little grass area that we can take our dogs out and, a place to eat outside, a picnic bench so we can have the dog with us. Those are the things I know that my family likes to look at with convenience stores, and we're lucky that we have a lot of creative members out there, retailers that are doing just that.
Yep, and we heard that in our survey. 14% or so of people say they use the bathroom, and a much higher percentage for those who buy their fuel off the highway, because it's food, gas, and bathroom all in one stop. And John, I will disagree with you. They still do argue. I've heard things like, she's breathing my air. So it does still exist. So the April NACS magazine, we'll talk more about what we heard from consumers. But before we leave today, we have a trivia question, as we do every week. And that music is our trivia music. So we have a fuels-related question. And the question today is, what does the term contango mean? And I will give you guys 4 choices. 1 is a batch of fuel that has too many impurities to sell. 2, a period of price imbalances. 3, a brand of fuel common in the 1930s. Or 4, a dance that traders do after selling a lot more than 100,000 barrels of oil.
And we're not allowed to Google that, right?
We're not allowed to Google that. So maybe there's only 3 choices there. But anyway, anybody want to throw out a guess or an answer? Is it contango, a batch of fuel that has too many impurities to sell, a period of price imbalances, a brand of fuel common in the 1930s, or a dance that traders do?
So I'm going to say it's a combination. It's 2 followed by 4, assuming the price imbalance is in the favor of the traders.
Well done. It is when the crude oil market near-term prices are lower than longer-dated ones. So that's like what happened 2 years ago in 2020, in April and May. And of course, the opposite is backward-dated, when near-term prices are higher than longer-dated ones. So we hope prices are lower, and we hope they're going down, because that's always good for business. So stay tuned. And thank you, John, and thank you, Paige, for joining us today.
Thanks, Jeff.
And thank you for listening to Convenience Matters. If you're not a subscriber already, feel free. You'll get it weekly.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.